What do you really know about your investments and your financial advisor? Gary Cinderbrandt, a veteran advisor and founder of Better Path Training, has spent decades helping both financial advisors and their clients get it right when it matters most. Gary pulls back the curtain on the advisory world to reveal the truths, the gaps, and the opportunities that most people never hear about, but absolutely should. It's about more than money. It's about legacy, trust, and making sure the people you care about are in the right hands. Welcome to If the Public Only Knew. Now here's your host, Gary Cinderbrandt.
Welcome back to the podcast, If the Public Only Knew. One of the really cool things about doing this podcast is I get to meet other hosts who have pretty interesting stories. And I guess a month or so ago, I had the privilege of being invited onto George Grombacher's show, and we had a really interesting discussion. By the way, George, with a name like Cinderbrand, I probably butchered your last name, so apologies in advance. But the discussion was far-reaching. I didn't quite know where it was going to go, but I really did have an enjoyable time speaking to George for quite a bit. George's been, I would say, a man of diverse skills, everything from an author to a speaker to a kind of quiet rock and roller, which I'm definitely going to want to hear about at some point. So, George, why don't you start us off? Tell us about your story and what put you in a position to have you do what you're doing currently. What was your journey like?
It was straight and easy, just like everybody else's, Gary. No, it's
Okay, I think
not
the
not a
the,
straight and
the
easy
detector's
journey.
going off a little, George.
Yeah, I realized that I started doing money stuff or got pulled into it when I was probably 6, 7 years old. Growing up, my folks split up when I was 5. My mom raised my older brother and I. She was a school teacher, and they didn't pay school teachers very much back then either. Grew up in northern Minnesota, had a great childhood, but there was just never enough money to go around. And once a month, my mom would pay bills. That meant she would literally spread all of the bills out in this big wooden dining room table. And my brother and I knew we just got to give mom space. We need to stay away because she's trying to figure out how to make it all work. And it always sort of did, I guess. But it just taught me month after month, year after year, avoid financial matters. And so I went through the next, roughly speaking, 30 years of my life not knowing that that was my programming. And then I learned about limiting beliefs, negative beliefs. And I'm like, oh, I wonder if I have any of those. I wonder why I spent all of my 20s, even though I was working as a financial advisor, in and out of debt, living paycheck to paycheck, making a bunch of money, then going broke kind of a thing. And I realized, oh, I have feelings of scarcity around money. I feel like I just want to avoid it. Even though I'm doing the finance thing, I was never tracking my cash flow. I certainly never budgeted. The only reason I was at that point is because my wife was forcing me to do it. And so long answer to your question is that's kind of it. I figured it out when I was 35. I got into the financial services business when I was 22. It was my first job out of college. But it took me a long time to really get down to the root of how I was interacting with money. And once I figured that out for myself, I realized, oh, I bet that there's other people who are struggling with this too in some form or fashion. And so my work has been, I'm 46 now, has been dedicated to helping people get better at money so they can live how they want. And that takes lots of different forms.
It's an interesting story and a lot of aha moments, and I don't think you're alone. So even being as a financial advisor, most FAs, as you know, you start out with a desk, a phone, and a chance. And the best ones I know really started with very little and were able to build it up. George, talk to me a little bit, if you would, about what you see out there today, especially in the middle class. We've had economic expansion for for quite some time, but yet it just seems that the average person just doesn't have a lot left at the end of the month. What is that something that could be solved educationally? Could that be solved with better budgeting? What are you seeing out there?
Yeah. And this is very much my wheelhouse. Um, I am a 401k advisor, and I do that because I'm interested in working with working class people who may never directly hire a financial advisor, but they still have obviously massive financial needs. And so this is what I am spending so much time and attention trying to figure out is not unlike Dave Ramsey. How do you help people get out of debt? How do you help them start to save and invest money? How do you help them to create a vision for their future, which is a compelling one? Because we are all so busy. I've got 3 kids and I've got to somehow make it to the gym today and make phone calls and do financial services stuff. And oh, by the way, I'm tired. I've got to get something to eat. And so maybe saving money or learning more about my 401k is number 6 on the list. But if I never get past number 5, well, then I'm never going to get to number 6. So yeah, there are so many of us out there who find that we have more month than money. We are trying to move money around to make minimum monthly payments on credit cards. So there's obviously not one answer to that question, but we're all going through the same kind of experience where we want to be doing the right things, but it's just maybe not a high enough priority because it's not on fire that we say, that's something I'm going to work on tomorrow or next month kind of a thing. So it goes on the back burner. The can gets kicked down the road kind of a thing. And that's obviously not a good thing when it comes to money and personal finance and compound interest and time value of money and stuff like that.
George, when you're interacting with your clients, your advisees, and I love the fact that you're in that 401k market, do you find that there is a certain degree of bias, which may be the result of either reading all the same idealistic positions or a bias towards fear because the market has a degree of volatility? Do you find most people just have that kind of behavioral bias that can become somewhat self-defeating over time?
Yeah, I think it'd be hard to not have that kind of bias. I think it would be hard to not engage in short-term thinking. Um, it would be hard to not think about your money as really hard and complicated because that is sort of how it's been fed to us. We've got green arrows, good, red arrows, bad, scary. You've got uh, just the world of the stock market is certainly presented as very confusing, and it's as confusing as you want to make it, or as simple as you want to make it. But I think more often than not, we are sort of trapped in complexity. And as you know, as we all know, the solution to complexity is not more complexity. It's just straightforward, kind of common sense and simple. Um, and so that's why Dave Ramsey is so effective. It's just because he can help people actually start making positive change. So that's what we need to do is people just need a clear path. And complexity is not necessarily a clear path.
You find, George, that people are open to learning about that more often than not, or is it something that they just look at as an alternative opinion that may be impacted by the next negative thing they read, the next thing that gets their feed that confirms whatever their bias is? Do you find that education using kind of an agnostic approach to it can help folks overcome that?
I think that's really helpful, certainly. One of the reasons that I was drawn and am doing 401k work is because we receive so many of our benefits from our employers these days. And when you get the opportunity to go to a workshop on budgeting or how do I start investing and it's employer sponsored, it's more accessible and I can just join versus having to go seek it out. So it's all about removing friction from the action. The thought about, oh my gosh, I need to interview a bunch of financial advisors or seek them out and then try to pick one and how do I know the right one versus I can get kind of dip my toe in and get started and just go to this workshop that my employer is sponsoring. I think that makes it a lot easier, maybe more accessible. I hate the term safe space, but it sort of is. um, maybe less threatening. Obviously, that being said, everybody's got access to YouTube and there's a million blogs out there and so much free information. But again, there's still friction there. And when this is already on my calendar because it's with my employer, I can do it over my lunch hour and da 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 da. I think it makes it a lot easier.
George, in your experience in dealing with this market, I'm sure you run into people who have all different attitudes about what money means to them. Um, do you ever find when you're speaking with someone that their attitude is, well, I just want to have more of it, but it's not connected to a specific goal or a specific outcome? It's just, I want to make what the market makes, or I want to make as much as I can. Do you find if it's not attached to something that's really important to them, it's a little more difficult for them to kind of invest with intention, if you will?
Yeah, I think that that's right. I think in a perfect world, we'd all be super clear with what it is we want and what our values are and the way I want to invest and where I'm going to end up and this, that, and the other thing. Um, but that's all. It's all, I guess, a process that we're all going to go through. And sometimes it is, I just want more money. I'm interested in getting a higher rate of return. Um, and that's a fine starting point. What you're describing is far superior, and it's better if people could be more thoughtful about what it is they want and why, and they could be really clear. Um, but simply wanting more is a good starting point. Where I see a big problem is when we do not have a greater reason or purpose. It's really hard to change our lifestyle. If I'm just cutting expenses and spending for the sake of cutting spending, which is sort of like I just want more, uh, I'm not going to keep doing that because it's not linked. But if it's, I want to help my kids to not make the same mistakes I do, I want to be able to provide a nice home for them. I want to be able to provide security and maybe education or some kind of an inheritance to them. Well, that's a lot stickier and that's more attractive. That's pulling somebody towards it versus me just trying to kind of white knuckle my way through saving money.
You bring up a lot of really interesting points. And in my career, the title of this podcast is If the Public Only Knew. And the obvious question is if they only knew what. And when it comes to financial advisory, if they only knew that the advice they were getting at the time they were getting it, whether it was appropriate or inappropriate relative to who they were and what they wanted to accomplish, they'd have a better baseline to try and make those determinations and those decisions. Recently, I was talking to a financial advisor at a large firm who was taking all the information from a new client, and they brought in a 401k that they'd rolled over. Client was 78 years old. Client was invested for 80% growth in all of last year's names, as you can imagine. Client had made extraordinary returns. I mean, just and could have done anything in the account they wanted and not had to pay any capital gains taxes whatsoever. But the client had such a bias towards stocks like Amazon and Alphabet, yeah, and the usual suspects and Nvidia, that the FA was really kind of tearing their hair out as to why it wasn't appropriate for this gentleman at this advanced age to be sitting at stocks that had just run up so dramatically. It was almost as if it wasn't real. How do you make that connection with an investor that has saved? They've had, let's say, good experiences over the past 5 years, but their allocation to risk assets doesn't necessarily match their age, where they're going to start to need that money to live on. How do you break through that barrier where they think whatever's just happened is going to continue and I'm going to stay in these stocks? How do you break through?
I look across the table, I say, "What are you nuts? No. What are you crazy?
As Chris Rock used to say, what's the matter with crazy?
What's the
Um,
matter with what's yeah, it's that's certainly a tricky one right there. And the answer is you might not be able to. I do not possess the ability to control anybody's mind, but certainly just presenting different situations or scenarios to them and helping them make their own decisions about things. Um, I do not have an awesome answer to that question, just being honest with you. But what experience I do have with those kinds of conversations is that helping people to try and go through best case, worst case, and then most optimal is always what I'm interested in doing. So if everything goes exactly the way that you want it to and exactly the way that you're planned, what's that going to look like? But what about if it doesn't? If things go totally sideways, what's that going to look like? How is that going to feel? Then most importantly, who is that going to impact? And I want you, in fact, I think you need to go to both of those places, kind of sit in that. And how's that going to feel if you're not going to be able to retire or take trips or go out to eat or whatever? Any of these things, all of them. And then let's talk about what probably the most optimal solution is. What could that look like? What changes will be required to get there? I love when stocks go up. I mean, is there anything better than when you made an investment and all of a sudden you got good news? Like if you bought Tesla on the day that everybody said Tesla was done. I don't know how low it got, but today it's probably $100 more, and it was just a couple of weeks later. And I've been looking at that stock every day because I bought it. It's so fun. It's just such a
Right.
fun thing. And so I get it. I understand how that feels, and I love it too. But I've also been on the other end where it's done the opposite, where I invested a lot of money in something and it's dropped like a stone. So I know how that feels too. Um, so that is my counsel on that is best case, worst case, most likely. And it's Goldilocks. It's too hot, too cold, just right.
Tell me about your most recent book.
Which one is the most recent? The Money Story book is the most
Yeah.
recent, and you teed me up because that is a major theme through your Money Story is it's too hot, too cold, just right. It is the whole Goldilocks thing. And the idea of it is I am in front of clients all the time trying to say something similar in a different way because they don't want to hear the same spiel. They don't want to see, well, at least the people I work with aren't interested in super fancy spreadsheets or PowerPoint presentations or talking about asset allocation and stuff like that. So I try to put it in the form of narrative. And I was on my way to meet with a client about 18 months ago, and they do short-term rentals cleaning. So these are really, really, really hardworking folks, and they can't possibly work anymore. They're already working as many hours as they can. Most of them are parents, and so they are just trying to make ends meet and doing it in a really honorable way. And I thought, well, a lot of these people are behind. They're not saving a lot of money. So I'm not going to get up in front of people and wave my finger at them or say you just need to save more money because that's dumb. It's not helpful and it's not going to be received very well. And I won't like saying it. So I thought, how can I position this? And I thought, okay, the first stage of your money journey is birth to where you are today. But where you are today doesn't have to be where you end up in the future when it comes to your money. So we get the opportunity to author the rest of our money story. So we get to decide where I want to end up with money. And then just start making plans that way. And we might not be able to make it all happen right away, but if we can just slowly start working that way, stop putting things off, stop procrastinating, and get closer to that. So that's how the idea was born. And now there's three stages to our money stories. It's birth to about seven, which is for me where I got those limiting beliefs about money. So investigating any negative or limiting beliefs you have, age seven to whatever your current age is. And then the third stage of your money story is moving forward. How do you want it to end? And I try to make it fun. I try to incorporate music and pop culture and stuff like that into it, so it's not a super cumbersome, heavy or boring read.
George, what would your guidance be for someone such as what you experienced with your mom? Uh, we've got people that are parents, they're worrying every single month about making ends meet. They're sitting around the kitchen table paying their bills online, and they just feel at the end of the month there's just nothing there. And it seems like no matter which way they turn, they just can't seem to push forward. But they want to. They want their kids to have a better life than they had. I know one of the concerns that I have as a parent is currently I'm concerned that my children will not have a lifestyle or the financial wherewithal that myself and my wife had. And that seems to be somewhat prevalent in this generation. There's frustration out there, there's fear, there's concern about the future. What do you tell someone like that?
I'm always, well, ever since I figured out the danger of painting with very broad strokes, the danger of telling people that there is a boogeyman out there who is trying to get them. I think the big danger of that is we're removing or diminishing somebody's agency. And if there's one thing I have, it is personal agency. I have belief in myself and my abilities, and I want to encourage others to foster that. And so when I'm looking around and I'm whatever the generation is, let's call them 25, if that's, I don't have any idea. It's certainly not millennial anymore. It's whatever. And they're reading about how they got screwed they got tricked into going to college, and there's no way they're ever going to be able to buy a house, and this, that, and the other thing. That's about as demotivating as it gets. And I want to give the finger to the system that I perceive and all of that, and turn my back on it and just say F it. And that's not a good thing, but I get it because we've spoon fed a lot of people that message. So I think that the answer to the question is number one, I believe that every single person is worthy of financial success and security. I believe that they are deserving of financial success and security, but none of us are entitled to it. You can have a career, you're not entitled to it. You can own a home, you're not entitled to it. You can do whatever you want, but you are not entitled to these things. If you desire change, then a change will be required. And you can look at that in the form of a sacrifice, or you can look at it in the form of an investment. If I am overweight and I no longer wish to be overweight, I have choices to make. I can change my diet, I can change my exercise routines, habits, or I can just keep doing what it is that I've always done. And if you keep doing what you've always done, you're going to get what you've always gotten. We learned this in seventh grade, that an object in motion will stay in motion unless it's acted on by an outside force, and an object at rest will remain at rest. Well, that means that something needs to come along and get us moving in a different direction. So is it possible for these fictitious people to cut expenses? I don't know. Is it possible for them to earn more money? I don't know, but these are the things that we need to figure out. And we need to take a microscope and a scalpel potentially, or maybe a hammer, to the situation and just figure out, okay, where are we today? Where do we want to be in the future? What's it going to take to get there? And am I willing, able, capable of doing those things? Well, that I suppose is the work. So
Well said. Final question. Tell me about your secret rock and roll career.
yes, yes. You know, I'm a performer. This is recent knowledge that I've figured out, is that I just like performing. I like speaking because I like to perform, and that's a form of performance. I like podcasting because it's a form of performance, and I've always loved singing, and I've always loved karaoke, just because obviously that is a performance. So if I were to do it over again, I don't know. Would I prefer to have started a band versus playing tennis? Maybe, maybe not. But I love music. And Gary, there is this, and I'm not going to be able to pull it out. I was just thinking about music. Nietzsche, Nietzsche talks about music as essential to the human condition. Nietzsche is the guy that said, "What doesn't kill you make you stronger." He absolutely loves music. Plato absolutely loves music. I'm like, oh my goodness, it's not just me, but these other slightly more brilliant people also appreciate music for what it is. And I believe that music makes everything better.
I
Uh,
couldn't agree
so
more.
so I
All
just think
right,
it's wonderful.
Two follow-up questions, as they say in the press room. You've got one, you're going to be stuck on an island for a year with your favorite person, so we're not going to stick you there alone. You have one album that you can take that will be downloaded to whatever device you're going to listen to it on, a single album and a single food. What are they?
Well, the food one is easy. I'd bring eggs, just because you can make an egg a million different ways. The one album, that one's a little trickier. My favorite artist is Bruce Springsteen. My favorite song by Bruce Springsteen is Thunder Road. So, but I don't know that it would be one of the Boss's albums anyway. So
I'm probably right there with you. Mine would probably be The Wild, The Innocent, and The E Street Shuffle.
well, there you go.
I wore that album
that's
out
one of
when
his
I first
first.
got it.
Maybe his first.
We agree on that. George, where can people find you? How do they get in touch with you? Where are you on the web?
Yeah, great. And Gary, thank you so much for having me. Maybe the best website is Money Alignment Academy. It's moneyalignmentacademy.com. It's got information for consumers, companies, and for financial advisors. You can find me on LinkedIn. That's really where I'm most active on social media. And then I've got a couple of podcasts. Gary, you were kind enough to be a guest on the Aligned Money Show. And then I do another podcast, which is called LifeBlood. So those are both great places to crawl inside my mind, if that's something that you are bold, brave enough to do or dumb enough to do.
George, thank you so much for joining me today. I really do appreciate it. Thanks again for having me on your show. Hopefully we'll get a chance to speak again. And again, this has been Gary Cinderbrand with George Grombacher, or If the Public Only Knew. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks for checking out If the Public Only Knew with Gary Cinderbrand. If you found today's episode helpful, be sure to follow the show and share it with another advisor, investor, or friend. For more on Gary, or to check out any links mentioned in the episode, head to the show notes. We'll see you next time.